friend Rudy that's gonna debut tonight. And yeah, let's do it, my friend. I use those glasses there.
Right.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing tonight? It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. It's a lot easier to be there, let me tell you this. I'm usually on that side, so being up here feels a little different. So tonight, we're going to talk about spiritual perspective. This is also going to be very hard. I'm used to walking a lot. So if I were to look at all of you, anybody here for the first time before I start?
You can walk around too, don't be together your stuff right there, okay?
Thank you.
Comfortable.
So tonight we're going to talk about spiritual perspective. If I were to look at each one of you here, and if I were to say, do you have a spiritual perspective? You probably would say, yes, I do. I do have one. But if I asked you to put that into words, that would be a little more difficult, right? So usually you have that understanding, but when you try to put it into words, it kind of gets a little complicated. So today we're going to understand what a spiritual perspective is, how important it is to have one, and what it do to us and for us. I believe that we all have an idea, so what we're going to do is just add on to the ideas that we currently have. But before we do that, we're going to go through a few concepts here. I have a few questions that I would like to ask you before we start. And let me start with this. There is no catch, okay? I will ask you questions. Sometimes the answer is very obvious. It is obvious, so there's no catch. So first question of the night, and there is no catch. What do you see here? A black hole, a shadow, a circle, right? So everyone sees the same thing.
It's a porcupine.
A porcupine, there we go. She got me. Okay, lecture's over. What about here? Again, no catch. What do you see? Rectangle, right? So the first image was a circle, and we all believe that to be true, right? We can all see it. So the second one is a rectangle, and we also believe it to be true, right? Okay, so what if I told you that that is not the truth? So what you have just now perceived as true is really not the truth. So what we are actually looking at is a cork. So we were looking at the shadows of this quark. But when you saw the circle was true to you, right? When you saw the rectangle, that was also true to you. But we are actually looking at neither. We are looking at a quark. And this comes to show us that truth is very relative. It depends on your understanding of what you're looking at or what you're experiencing. So your truth could be different from mine. What is true to me might not be true to you, but they could both be part of the same truth, right? So let's keep that in mind. Now, let's take a walk. So let's look at the three possibilities here as a spot in your life. So we all come to places where we have to make choices. So here there are three possibilities. You can go to the left, you can go straight ahead, or you can go to the right. And you have to pick a way. But if I tell you, pick one of those, does it matter which way you take? You really don't know much about them, do you? You really don't know what to expect. You don't know what's ahead. So you don't have any knowledge of this. It's kind of difficult to make a choice when you feel like you don't really know what you're going to face, right? But if I were to tell you a little bit about the ways, maybe you could look at them, and then you would be able to make a choice. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a little bit of knowledge about the three ways, and then you have to pick one. So, if you go to the left, there's some dark clouds in there, lots of lightning, it looks kind of a storm, so you know you're going to have to be facing that. If you decide to go to the right, you might be fighting some dinosaurs. But you still have to take one of those roads. Which one are you going to take now that you have a little more knowledge? You're probably going to go straight ahead towards the sunshine. Hopefully there's a beach at the end, right? But so if we think about what we saw in the first image, right, when we were talking about what is true and what is truth. So truth, we know that it's based on on something that is true to you, and ours might be different, right? And here, before you could make a choice, you needed more knowledge. You needed to understand better what was happening before you could make a decision, right? Why? Because you know that your action has consequences. You didn't know anything about the three possibilities here. Before, it was nothing. So you could go anywhere, and you wouldn't really know what you're getting yourself into, right? So as we're building up, we know that having an idea of something and having knowledge of other things is important for us to decide on the actions we are going to take. Everyone agree with that? Yes. So knowledge is always, like they say, knowledge is power, right? It gives you confidence. So we're going to continue over here, and we're going to keep that in mind. Now, we're going to go from that. We're going to look at this. So if you open the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 2, item 5, you find that statement in there. And it says, the clear and precise idea that one holds of the future life, provides an unshakable faith in the future. This faith carries enormous consequences for the moralization of human beings, because it completely changes the point of view from which they consider earthly life. This is kind of what we just saw, right? It's talking about having a point of view. It's talking about understanding something, right? What else is it talking about? It's talking about believing in something else. So it's talking about knowledge in a certain way, right? So if you have knowledge, you're able to make better decisions. This is having kind of like deals in the same realm, right? It's telling you, if you have that precise idea of a future life, if you have a spiritual idea inside of yourself, you can face earthly trials in a different way because you feel better prepared, because you understand them better, right? And we can apply that in all parts of our lives. So not only on the spiritual side, but in our social living or day-to-day. So the more you know, the better you can navigate through those things, right? So to have a point of view, to have a spiritual perspective is important, right? And we apply that to all stages of life. Now imagine going through life without really believing in anything else. So what you hold to be true is what you have in front of you, and that is it. You don't believe in anything else. So we all go through our regular cycle of life, right? And so we are born, we grow up, we reproduce, we grow old, and we die. Does anybody doubt this? No. It's very true, right? It's a simple truth. We all know that because we are here. We see this on our daily lives. With a few variations, right? Not everybody gets to grow up. Not everyone will have kids. Not everybody gets to get old. But one thing is certain, right? We were born, and we will die. So this body that we have here, one day this will cease to exist. Now imagine going through life thinking that this is all that there is for you. You're going to come here, you're going to spend 80 to 100 years, and it will be over. How would you live your life if you have nothing else to look out for?
In the fast lane.
In the fast lane, right? I kind of agree with that. So there will be driving forces, right, guiding you in what to do, but your motivations will be different. Why? Because life becomes what? Life, when you are in a living like this, your one goal is to be king, right? So life becomes more kind of a compilation of books and laws and rules and regulations that you have to follow. But you don't believe in anything else, so you know that as long as you can escape the justice of men, you'll be okay, right? So you are going to, like Tim said, you're going to live in a fast lane. Maybe greed is going to be something that is going to drive you, right? Selfishness. There is no motivation for you to be nice to anybody. Your goal is to get through this life as good as possible. So you're going to try to work as much as you can, make as much money as you can, spend as much as you can, live for as long as you can the best way possible. But without what? Without giving much consideration to your actions, because you know there is no other consequences but the law of man. So as long as you can escape that, you are good to go. So you really don't pay any attention to anybody's pains. People's problems really don't matter to you. There is no need for you to do charity or to help. So you want to be king and you want to be served. As long as you're not serving, you are happy. Because there's nothing else for you after here. So your actions really don't have any other consequences. So this is one type of person that you find when we're living in a world where we don't have any kind of spiritual beliefs, right? But is everybody going to be like that? So is everyone going to be greedy? Is everyone going to be selfish, egotistical? No, right? People are not all bad or all good. Are we all created the same? No. Does anybody know how a spirit is created? Simple and ignorant, lacking knowledge, right? So everyone familiar with the Spirit's book? So if we were to open the Spirit book, right in the beginning of it, where it starts talking about, so on question 115, I like how that goes. Are some spirits created good and others bad? And the answer he gets is, God created all spirits simple and unaware, meaning lacking all knowledge. So you can't say that people are all bad or all good, or that we were created one way or the other. We were not, right? It's going through our life experiences that we get to decide who or what we want to be. So even though there is no spiritual belief, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to be greedy or selfish. So the other possibility that we have here is the person that, even though they don't consider the spiritual side of their lives, they believe in a social duty, what they call the social justice. So they believe in values that should guide society. So they believe it to be their responsibility, whatever they have that is extra, whatever they are not using for themselves to their benefit, they believe that it is their social duty to help others. Right? So they are not doing out of the greatness of their heart, or they are not doing because they are considering a spiritual link to the person. So it's not really because I believe in something else, but because I believe it to be my job to help our society. So we all grow as a society, but I don't think it is right for you to have so little and for me to have extra, so I will help you with my extra. So it is an improvement from the first person, right? So it is a step in the right direction. There is charity being done. But it's a charity as an obligation. There's some changes happening, but it's a change that is happening because I feel it to be my job. So we have the first person, right, that doesn't believe in anything and is very greedy. It's all about him, me, myself, and I. Maybe you later, but I always come first, right? Then you have somebody else that is, hey, I have a little left over here, so I can give this to you. But I'm not taking anything for myself and giving it to you. I have extra. So I'm not suffering. I'm not lacking anything. I took care of myself first, so it's still me first, and then you later. And then there could be other types of people, but there's another one that I want to talk about. What about if you don't fit the first model, right? So let's say you are not a greedy person, but you're also not rich. Or let's say you were rich and you lost everything. So in a world like this, who you are is what you have, right? So they kind of mix. So it's not about who you are as a person, what your values are, but it's what you have in your pocket or what you can offer to others. So in a certain way, your possessions is who you are. So if you lose that, in your eyes, you lost everything, because you lost your identity. Your identity was the clothes you had on, the food that you had, the car that you drove, the things that you did, and without that, you don't have anything. But let's say you lost everything, so now you're desperate in this world. Or let's say you just don't fit that model, but you are also not a charitable person, and you see no point in being here. To you, life makes absolutely no sense. Why is it that I have to come to this planet, and I have to suffer so much for 80 to 100 years, and then I get to go, and that's it, right? The curtains close, and the show is over, and there is nothing else left. So why am I going to be here? Right? I have no motivation to be here, right? So I'm not the type that will be helping anybody. A lot of them, they do what? They resort to suicide. There's no purpose for them here. They believe that life gave them no purpose at all, so they decide to take the easy way out. There's a problem with this, right? Because when this door closes, what happens? another one opens, right? So you close the door to this life, another one opens, and you see yourself somewhere else, not dead. Now your problems just became a little bigger because now not only you have to deal with everything that you were dealing with before, now you have to atone for the fact that you also took your own life. So not having a spiritual perspective, not understanding all of this, kind of makes you go that way, right? So in a way, to have faith is what? To have faith is to save lives, right? Because maybe if you had a spiritual understanding, if you had a bit of a spiritual perspective, maybe you wouldn't have done what you did, right? So that would have stopped you. So your actions maybe would have been different. So now we're starting to get to that spiritual perspective and see how we're starting to build on that. So the more you know, the better choices you make in life, right? So when you start to consider the spiritual side of things, then maybe your actions start to change. So now what happens? So let's take these 3 examples of people we just saw, and what if we were to start adding elements of spirituality here? What do you think would happen? Do you think that we would change? Do you think that our actions would become different? We would see life differently, or day-to-day life? As humans, we are naturally curious, right? We always want to learn more. We always have this feeling that there is more out there for me. There is something else that I can learn. There is something else. So we have this longing. And even though we were created simple and lacking knowledge, in the spiritual side and also in the material side, right? When we're born as babies, we know nothing. We depend on our parents for everything. And as we start going through life, we start acquiring our own knowledge and we start to build on that, right? So that is a constant. So before we had spirituality, before our consciousness was this evolved, we were looking around us, and we were looking at nature, and nature was giving us the answers for that longing that we had, right? And then nature wasn't enough. Then we started to look up, right? We started to look at the stars, and we started to idolize the moon and the sun and the stars and the planets, and we start to build from there. But then, if we go thousands of years back, we started to look at something that was bigger than the star, bigger than the moon, that we could relate to, right? And you see that man starts to mix animals, the shape of an animal with the shape of the human body, and so the first gods were kind of chimeras, right? They were kind of animals, kind of human, but it's what was normal to us. So spirituality started coming like that. Then you fast forward thousands of years, then now gods, they start to have the human form, right? You have the Celtic gods, you have the Roman gods, what else? You had the Norse gods, the Chinese gods, right? The Roman gods, and they start to what? They start to come into play. And with that, humans start to change. Because now I understand that because I'm starting to build that spiritual perspective, now there is something else for me to think about. I cannot only think about the laws of man, right? I cannot only try to avoid the justice of this world, because in my head now, my actions have other consequences too. Now they have spiritual consequences. So it makes me think a little bit more, right, before I do or say anything. So there's yet another shift in here. And we keep going forward, right? So there are the Egyptian gods that are very famous, until we get to Moses, right? Which is the God from the Old Testament, which was brought to us as our first revelation. So we go from this belief that there are all kinds of gods, and then Moses comes and he shows us that there is one God. So now we're thinking, okay, so all of these expressions of divinity that are spread throughout the world, they are all what? Different expressions of the same, right? There is one God, right? Or supreme intelligence, the reason behind all things, right? So Moses comes and he gives us the image of the God from the Old Testament. But this God, if you really think about it, right? He was what? He was severe. He was punitive, right? People used to call on him for wars. He was wrathful. So now you know that your actions have consequences in this world, but you are afraid of what the consequences will be spiritually, right? Because you know that if you don't appease this God, what will happen to you? Punishment. Because that's how you know God, right? You know him to be punitive. So you are afraid that if you don't do the right thing, you're going to either spend a lot of time burning, or you're going to spend eternity in heaven, paradise, right? Which is the image that a lot of us have, grapes and songs, right? That's what we see as paradise. So you know that now you have to avoid, right, justice in the hands of humans, but you also have to make sure that you appease God. Otherwise, you are going to spend all eternity burning. But if you make him happy, you will spend all eternity in heaven. So there is yet another shift in the way that humans act, right? But it is still not out of the goodness of our hearts. Why? Because this change is brought forward by fear, right? So we are afraid of this God. So then what happens? We fast forward a few thousand more years, 5,000 or 6,000 years. And then there's yet another change. So we're missing two elements in here before we can really say that our transformation or spiritual perspective is now settled. So then the person that the most important person to have ever walked this planet comes into the picture, right? So now Jesus comes in the picture. And he is bringing us another element that we're missing in this understanding. So now we're ready, right? We have lived thousands of years with the idea of this one God, but we start to get hungry again. We start to get thirsty for more. We start to look for more answers. It can't really be this. Like we come here, we spend 100 years, and we have to suffer through life. But when life is over, if we haven't done a good job, we're going to suffer a little bit more. But then Jesus comes and he's like, no, you guys got it all wrong. Yes, it is one God, but our Father is caring. So now he brings the picture of love, the element of love, right? It's a loving God. It's a loving Father. He is caring, and he is merciful, and he is forgiving. He is not this punitive, wrathful, vindictive, vengeful God that you believe him to be. It's completely the opposite. He is love, like he is a welcoming Father. He sows our seeds in fertile soils, right? And he will water it, and he will take care of it so that you can cast deep roots, right? So that you can grow strong, and in your time, you can bear fruit. So we are not in any hurry here. So God is waiting for you. He's giving you the time. So there is yet another shift, right? So now, yes, I still have the same worries. I am still worried about making sure that I live according to the laws of man, but I'm also making sure that I live according to the laws of God. But now it's a different God. Now it's a God that is loving and caring and merciful and takes care of us, right? So now my change is a bit better. It's a bit different. But people start to get thirsty again because Jesus didn't come and give us everything. He said, can't give you everything right now. You're not ready for it, right? Because think about it. When we heard that there was one God, it took us about 5,000 years for Jesus to come and tell us, hey, by the way, God is love. And he said, but now you have to wait a little bit longer before you guys are ready for the third revelation. So about 2,000 more years go by before we get the next element, right? But so people are looking around, they're thirsting again, they're looking for answers like, how can a God that is love? Everybody says that God is supremely just and good, but how come this supremely just and good God allows so much suffering in the world, right? Why there are so many differences? Why is that mother crying? Why is that child sick? Right? Why there are so many injustices and inequalities? It doesn't really make sense. Why? Because we are still missing one ingredient, right? So in the 19th century, Allan Kardec starts to ask questions too, because he has the same kind of doubts that we have. But it was the right time for the right questions. And then what? Then what Jesus had promised us almost 2,000 years before starts to happen. We start to get the answer. He sends the consoler that he had promised us, right? So the Spirit of truth, through the work of Allan Kardec, he brings us the third revelation through Spiritism, which is what? Anybody? Take a guess. That life does not end with death, right? That yes, you are right, life does go on, but it's not just one time around. Then the Spirit of truth brings us reincarnation. Now things start to make sense, right? Because now all the doubts and all the questions that you had before about God being good but unfair, it just doesn't make sense, right? But now with reincarnation, you know that we've had many lives before, right? We probably will have many lives to come, and that what is playing out in your life right now is not unfair or it's unjust. No, it's not. It's what? It's the result of the actions that we all took. So our past actions or current actions, they do what? They put us exactly where we are. So the trials, the pains, the tribulations that we're going through, they're not unfair. They are exactly what we need in order to continue to learn, to continue to grow. So this entire time, God has been nothing but love and merciful, right? You came here, you spent 40, 50, 60, 100 years, and you didn't learn much. Guess what, my son? You're going to go back. And you're going to get to do it all over again, and all over again, and all over again, and all over again. And it's a never-ending cycle, because learning is constant. Progress goes on forever, right? So we are always learning something. So now it makes sense. Now you think about all the stages that you went through, right? And we all go through this, right? So right now here, we are probably all in different evolutionary stages, right? My perception is probably not the same as yours. That is different from yours. Our stories are different. So we have, in a way or another, gone through all of these cycles to get to where we are. So now we can say that we have what? We have a solid spiritual perspective, right? So now the actions that you take, they are what? They are more thought of, right? You're not just acting because you know there are consequences. So now you have this preoccupation to act accordingly. Not only because God is telling you that you have to, but because you know that you need that in order for you to continue to grow, for you to continue to evolve and to develop, right? So now that transformation is real. Now that we have met this God that is light and love, right? And that we have connected to him, now we understand the mysterious ways that he works, we can truly transcend, right? So now that transformation is out of our free will. That transformation is because I want, right? Why? Because now I know the answer to the mother that is crying because she lost her baby, or to the kid that is in the hospital with cancer, or to that person that doesn't have a house to sleep under, or to that one that doesn't have anything to eat, or for the ones that are lonely, or the ones that are desperate. There's a reason behind all of that. Is it painful? Yes, of course it is painful, right? Is it sad to see? Yes, of course it is. Does it hurt? A lot. But there's a reason, right? And there is hope, because you know that after this, there will be more. And you'll be able to see the person again, or you'll be able to try again. So there is no failing. That is just not doing it right now. But we'll be able to do later. And that brings us great comfort to know that this is not it. That there is more for you to look out for, right? There is more there that you can do. So now you feel like you can change. So now your transformation is for real, right? So now you're doing out of the what? Out of your free will. It comes from your heart. It comes from inside. So you're bringing this out of you. And it makes sense. So now we can go all the way back to the beginning where life was born and it was limited and it was just at one time around and you had to get it right or you wouldn't get it at all. And we can change that. And now that cycle that before was very limited becomes to be born, to die, to be reborn again, and constantly progress. That is the law. So now your spiritual perspective is complete and there's something else for you to do. So how important is it to have a spiritual perspective? It's very important, right? Like we saw in the beginning, it's life-saving, right? Because when you have faith, right, you can lose everything, but you will still have God, right? And to have God is to not really need much. There's really not much you need after that. I thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.